The Spin-Off Podcast Network. Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tāmaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today.
The Fold is brought to you by O Media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa. Nau mai, hoki mai kia The Fold, e mihi nei ko Duncan Greed toku ingoa. Welcome to The Fold for another week. I have today as my guest Miriyana Alexander, who is the head of premium at the New Zealand Herald, which just recently celebrated its second birthday. Herald Premium is its reader revenue program. It's the hard paywall that went up around its best journalism a couple of years ago. And this is something that the Herald has been talking about for a long, long period of time. I think there was actually a version of it ready and waiting for a button to be pushed. I actually have a memory of basically encountering what I felt like was a sort of a soft version of it, or like a test version of it in the wild in like 2014. Apparently, the rumor has it that Jane Hastings, who was Michael Boggs' predecessor as CEO, didn't like the idea, wanted to go pure mass market, and that sort of set them back a few years. But well, whatever the sort of origin stories are, they certainly were the first major publisher in New Zealand to put up a paywall. And they chose quite a curious model, to my mind. It won't be a surprise to kind of regular readers of mine or listeners to this podcast that I find the hard paywall just a difficult model to get my head around, in the sense that if there is no ability for non-subscribers to access your best content, then your free content, you're relying on your free content to advertise that. And, to me, having some ability for people to see what your best work looks like to hit a hard paywall to go over makes more sense. But the Herald is committed to this, though. As Mary says, there is a very much a never say never on that, and you can almost hear in her response that there might be change coming in the next year or two. But regardless, as she rightly says, this has been a very successful program. They've got 102,000 digital subscriptions, which includes some print subscribers who have taken up the conversion. That is what a digital transition starts to look like in the New Zealand context. She wouldn't be drawn on numbers, and you get the sense that they're a few years away from that beautiful moment that the New York Times had a few years ago, when reader revenue outpaced advertising revenue. And once that Rubicon is passed, you're never likely to go back. And certainly, our experience on the spin-off, where we probably have somewhere around 50% of our editorial costs are covered by our members. You need that. There is no world in terms of a pure digital product, which ultimately, much as they are still a print-driven organisation for now, there will come a day when they, stop publishing the Herald in various parts of its print edition. So you are trying to build a bridge to that future, and that future absolutely inevitably involves an ongoing commitment from your readership to fund you. And that's been Murray's job the past couple of years. So we talked about that, about the challenges of that, about the relationship with social media, about the big challenge, which we didn't get into enough, but I think is a really pregnant one for the media at the moment, which is, how do you diversify your audiences? I think a lot of New Zealand's mainstream has been a code for Pākehā media, and both in terms of the sort of different ethnic communities, and also increasingly younger audiences, they just aren't particularly being well served by our media, and that's a big challenge that is a thread throughout the Fold, but also something the Herald is confronting. And, Miri intimated it's very much front of mind for the moment. They've recently appointed a head of diversity, for example. Talked about ZB and how there is a tension there, as I observe, between the sort of strong, right-wing opinion leading on the Herald, which ultimately exists as a gatekeeper to the quite a different offering on the premium side. But mainly this is about the Herald Premium and subscription-driven models in general. So I think it's they've certainly got the most sort of sophisticated and evolved version of that in the local market, and so there's a lot to get into there. The Fold is proudly supported by Vodafone. Incredibly grateful to Vodafone for allowing me the privilege of talking to so many different kinds of people in our media. We are a Vodafone for Business customer, and our business would be unimaginable without a very fast, very reliable internet connection. And so if you're in the market for one, go take a look at vodafone.co.nz. This is Miriyana Alexander, Head of Premium at the New Zealand Herald on The Fold. Kia ora and welcome to The Fold, Miri.
Hi, how are you, Duncan?
I'm very, very good. We were just talking before, and we were reminiscing about a year ago when things were very bad. And I thought, let's maybe start there. Because, I think we were either just about coming to the tail end of the first big lockdown last year. And it's so easy now, a year on, to kind of just to sort of abstract that and to feel, to sort of forget that notion. But there really was a sense that literally everything was on the table for New Zealand's media back then. Do you want to sort of cast your mind back there and how that felt to you?
Sure. I know that we were reminiscing, but to me, reminiscing has always felt kind of quite nicely nostalgic, whereas I think this time last year was truly a time where I thought, probably for the first time in my career, and, I've been around a while, that actually anything could happen. I do remember sitting during lockdown at my kitchen table, my work from home space, and kind of bursting into tears when I got the Bauer news. And yeah, that kind of crystallised to me that this was a crisis time, obviously, but that anything could happen, and it felt that it was a really perilous time, and in an industry which has been, financially challenged for some time, that here we were, and suddenly anything really could happen.
I mean, I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand what the sort of business side of journalism, particularly print journalism, looks like. Because I remember there was a particular issue of the Sunday Star Times that I bought, and I did an ad count through it, looking for anything, like what could be a paid ad, and I think I came to 6 in the whole thing.
Is that this time last year?
This was, I think, in early April of last year, and it wasn't, that wasn't radically different to what was happening in the Herald. So as much as your job is premium, and we'll talk about that shortly, the lifeblood of publishing news media still remains advertising. That's correct, right?
Yeah, and print and digital, that is obviously the dominant revenues. And look, I think it was a crisis, right? And what we didn't know was how long would we be in crisis for. And so understandably, advertisers were being incredibly careful with their spend, and revenues, almost disappeared overnight. And I guess us and many media companies had to respond to that, because we didn't know how long that situation would last. And therefore we had to try and manage our way through that. And thankfully, again, appreciating that when this crisis isn't over, we bounced back from that pretty well. And they didn't disappear forever and for a very long time, but they started coming back, and our commercial teams were working really hard in that space. But you're right, the advertising revenues were incredibly compromised, and that's kind of why we and many other publishers in the world have increasingly looking to reader revenue, because we need that to continue to sustain journalism.
Again, so we'll talk about that shortly. On the advertising side, the thing that has, really struck me over the past year is the fact that we have seen the end of the front page.
Harvey Norman, are you saying?
Harvey Norman just own it all. And I heard that there's an amazing story behind it, and there was like a single person who said, we're going to take that real estate and have stayed with it. So it's obviously working for them. And on one level, I feel like they should maybe be given some kind of New Year's honour for their sort of civic duty. No doubt they got a commercial payout as well. But on the other, I'm like, the front page as a the way of sort of setting the tone and agenda for the paper and of that moment. I miss it. What's your sort of relationship with that?
It's been interesting, isn't it? There was a joke going around that Harvey Norman was the most bylined journalist of 2020 on the front page, and I think that's probably true. Well, look, on the one side, incredible support for journalism, but let's not pretend that it was altruistic, that it really did work for Harvey Norman, and that's why they continued to buy the front pages and inside spreads and newspapers up and down the country, not just the Herald. And so we have heard anecdotally that they got incredible results from doing that, and that's obviously why they continued doing that. I hear what you say about the front page. When I used to edit our weekend papers, I really hated, I didn't hate it because that's too strong a word. I loved trying to sell my papers at the weekend as well, because I think that's the job of an editor. I do think that increasingly for us at the Herald, the majority of our sales are to subscribers. So actually that front page, which I very much saw as the showcase of what's inside and look, buy this great paper because you've got so much great reading in it, became less used to be, for example, when there was a great competitive Sunday market, Sunday Star Times, Herald on Sunday, selling on the newsstands, selling much bigger in retail space, whereas now the majority of our sales are to subscribers, so they're getting the paper home delivered. So in terms of the imperative to sell, I didn't really like losing that. And look, we've got a great commercial team that we work really closely with. So if it's a big event, we don't have the front page kind of wrapped, because if it's an election day or a big other news event that we know is on, we try and work around that. And also when other big stories break, we've got a mechanism where we're able to pull them, because obviously advertisers don't necessarily want to be in that space, and we want the front page to be the front page. So yeah, I hear you, but don't forget it wasn't that long ago that advertising was the front page in daily newspapers up and down the country.
It's true. The thing that just sort of on that, just to pick my own interest, during the sort of heyday of the Sunday Star Times, Herald on Sunday wars, like what was the
wars? Did you say?
Well, I mean, whatever you like to call. I always get in trouble for calling everything a war, but it's just
it's a great word.
Well, it's just helpful in terms of framing things. I'm not a militarist. Don't cancel me. But what kind of a fluctuation would you see between like a fantastic humdinger of a story versus where you totally tanked it?
I'd like to think that we never totally tanked it. But look, believably, there were obviously different topics and issues that resonate, and they kind of changed over time. I do think I wasn't at the Host then. I was at the Sunday Star Times. There was quite a celebrity emerging, and people were interested in and would buy that for, a latest story of some of the celebrity of the moment. I know that property was then and remains today an incredibly interesting topic for people that people will buy for. I do think that, some of the personal finance stuff, people care about the KiwiSaver, some of those kinds of things would do that. But I think back early on, when it was a war or a big great weekly fight, the front page was really important to sell the paper. But I think it was more than that. It was what else you would find inside. And I think they were trying to be different newspapers. The Sunday Star Times was trying to be a broad, national broadsheet, and it was, because it sold up and down the country. The Herald on Sunday was a Taupo North, lively, brash upstart, which was appealing completely to Aucklanders and some of their predilections around property and celebrity, and that really worked.
I mean, and that was in some ways not the last golden era, but certainly like a period where the old model was still working and firing on most, if not all, cylinders. Yet your new role kind of points to the fact that the new role, it's coming up 3 years on now, but like you said, it's gone by in a flash. To what, where, let's talk about premium. What your role as head of premium? What does that mean? It's not a purely editorial role, but to explain to our audience, what you do.
Yeah. So I started in this role, kind of leading the project to introduce premium to our business, and that I really actually enjoyed that. It was my first management of a big project, and I really enjoyed the commercial elements. It was everything. It was commercial marketing. It was largely a tech project actually, because we had to introduce a new model of technology to our website, which was incredibly complex, and it had to be a great customer journey. We all know that the less friction is best in terms of a great customer experience. So there was a lot of discussion and meetings around how it would look, how it would, what the customer flow would be, all that kind of stuff, which was had not been my world. But look, I do think we had a great team working on it, but I think it was right to have an editorial person running the project, because this was something for our audience, and we had to put our audience front and centre. So the first part of that job was running that project to introduce premium to the market, and then after we kind of launched, and the madness of those few weeks afterwards, it's now a kind of interesting mixture. And I don't know that there's another role like it in New Zealand by the nature of what we do, but it's a mixture of editorial and driving the content, because I feel like I was lucky enough just before I took over the project to be in the UK and got to go and visit lots of the great publishers over there, the Telegraph, the FT, the Times, and they were very generous in sharing with me their models, how things worked, tips for starting, don't do this, do this. And I found that incredibly beneficial. I found that when I'd come back, I felt like I had a really good head start of having my head in the space, because I didn't have anywhere else in New Zealand I could look to learn from. So I felt like we'd picked up a whole lot of great intel. And so my job then, once we'd launched, was to really focus hard on the right kind of content, because fundamentally people will buy our subscription and only stay if they're satisfied with what we're giving them. So I work very closely with a lot of our kind of section heads, head of business, head of sport, political editor, the newsletters, because it is about ensuring we have a great menu of premium content. And as we were discussing before, the thing about a digital publishing platform is it's never ending, and you could throw hundreds of pieces of content at it a day, but actually, is that the right strategy? We've got to make sure we're stopping and slowing down and investing in some time to be able to really do some deep dives and bring quality to the table. So it's very editorially focused. It's also a lot of strategy. So what's working in terms of the content, but also the customer journey, the experiences, the feedback we get from people about the tech side of things. It's also other content areas we should be looking at. And I've become increasingly interested in the data and the science around engagement, because as we know, engagement is key to keeping, again, our audience happy. And so yes, we can sell them a sub, and they might want to buy a sub because it's a good deal, or they see a story they want, or they think there's great work there. But actually, whether we keep them or not depends on what they then find once they've joined us. So we do put a lot of effort and time into making sure that we're delivering a good experience. And we launched without what you could potentially say was all the bells and whistles. And again, that was something that we'd been very much encouraged to do from the overseas publishers, who'd said, you'll feel like your proposition is never perfect, but if you don't start, you don't start. So get on and get started, and you can refine and add and continue to develop as once you're in play. And I think, that's probably true of all of those great publishers who have been on for a decade or more, and they continually developing their offering and their strategy. And so I've become really interested in the data. It's really interesting to see what you can get and what you can see the audience engaging with us. We've done things like, obviously, after introducing premium, my next kind of biggest project in that space was getting the app, getting a new app. And so we redesigned the app, and it's much better functionally. We've got additional features for subscribers, because we believe they should get those if they pay us. So there's increased functionality for that. Then we went on to do things like introduce commenting late last year, because we know that our customers want to have some really good functionality as part of their subscriptions. And just personally, I've been really thrilled with commenting. Commenting subscribers are our most engaged audience segment on our site. So they spend the longest time every time they come to us with us. And I guess that makes sense, right? Because they're coming, they're reading a story they're interested in, they're having their say on it, they're engaging in a conversation with other people about it, and suddenly, 20 minutes has gone by.
Yeah. So do you know what the sort of ratio of premium to non-premium, do you have a name for the non-premium stories?
We don't call it non-premium. I mean, I think, look, in all seriousness, one of the things that I really liked about introducing premium is a real focus on quality, and irrespective of whether a story is a premium story or is available to all of our audience, we want to win with quality. And so I think that's been another really encouraging thing personally from my point of view and the newsroom's point of view, is that there has been a focus on quality and making sure that everything we do is quality, so that, that our experience is good for everybody. Because let's face it, the subscribers aren't just reading the premium content, they're reading the other news of the day and the other free content. So that is been something that we've really focused on. So in terms of percentages, the vast majority of our content is freely available to everyone on the site, and the premium content, it differs by, vertical and depending on the news of the day and what else is going on. So there's not so much a 50-50 or whatever. It's that we've undertaken that the majority of our content stays free. So at least 60 to 70% of the content that we produce every day is free.
And roughly how many sort of premium stories would you get for your sort of, as a subscription?
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. You'll never read it all. There's so much. No, look, in all seriousness, one of the things that's on my mind is, is how much, because actually it is, people have only got so much time in the day, right?
Totally.
And we know that people aren't just coming to the Herald. There's so many great media companies in New Zealand and the world where you can get information from. And personally, I think you're not just kind of competing for people's attention around news. It's their life and what else is on Netflix tonight and all those kinds of things. So I think that one of the things that we are looking at, that we try and do, and we keep talking about it and we've got to do it some more, is slowing down. So we used to publish way more stories a day just overall than we do now, because we're saying let's slow down. We have got a commitment to quality. Quality takes time. So pick winners. We know that we must do the news of the day and the big important announcements and the breaking stories, but actually increasingly our focus is on our unique journalism, and that is what our team can bring to the table. And I think we don't need to. I think we've been used to in the fast-paced news environment, changing up the front page, if you like, dozens of times a day. And I think it's on us to actually stop and slow down and go, normal people don't come to our website 100 times a day. And so, again, in the data space, I'm really interested at looking at our peak times and planning when we drop our content at the right time of the day to get people's attention, but also not doing this great piece of work that we take a couple of months to do, and it drops and then it's gone.
Just flash through the homepage.
And people miss it. And actually, one of the most interesting things has been, because again, speaking to the time challenge, the first Christmas that Premium was on, and as we know, journalists like to pack up and get out the door, and so we've got skeleton staff and then having a rest after a big hard year, of course. So I was quite worried the first year about Premium and thinking, this is when people have got time to read. I really want to showcase our great work. And so what we did was make this plan to bring back our evergreen content or the content that we'd done during the year that was related to something newsworthy, with a note on it to say this is our, and it went really, really well. And that reminded me that actually not everybody has got time every day to read dozens and dozens of pieces of content. So let's bring it back, and we do that now, not just at summer, but we'll think about what, if something happens and we've done this piece on it, let's bring that back and people can have a look at it, and that works really well as a strategy, which is also nice, because it used to be, didn't it, that people would get the front page of the print edition and go great, but then that's the next day it's gone. You're online potentially on the homepage for an hour and gone. So that's what we really want to do, is slow down, let our great journalism be showcased, and let people get a chance to read it.
In terms of the actual the fundamental sort of design thinking of it, or the way that it is presented to your audience. So a decision that was made very early on was to have the majority of your content be free, and then the remainder behind a hard paywall, which is not probably the dominant. There tends to be like a freemium model where there might be one or two stories, or like an elastic number of stories that are available to everyone, and then once you hit that number, so that you can show the best of your journalism to the largest possible audience, but also when you hit that paywall, that's when you will be prompted to sign up. The Herald's gone a different route, which is a big majority free, forever for everyone, and then another part which is hard paywall that you can never see.
Well, you can see when you buy a sub, which is so worth it.
But this is, look, I agree that it's worth it. I've been a subscriber since day one, but
thank you.
I do. Well, it's a good service, but there is I've always felt like a contradiction there in that your very best work is invisible to the to an audience that to people who aren't already subscribers, who are seeing what is obviously irrespective of the emphasis on quality, it's not as good as what's behind the paywall. Otherwise, you'd charge for it. So, have you ever had cause to doubt that, or why the sort of continued commitment to that model?
Sure. So look, I am really interested in the models. I think just about every single publisher that I can think of in the world started one way and ended up experimenting, and I think that's kind of a logical thing, right, to do that. And so yes, we made that decision, quite early in the piece. And look, I think we'd have to say, given the success in the first 2 years, it's working really well for us. I think though that we should be continuing to watch the model and have a look at it. As you say, there's lots of different kinds of models in the world, and I guess in time we may too change ours, because that's kind of what publishers do. But at the moment, that's the model that we have subscribed to ourselves, if you like, and it is working for us. I hear you though. I do think and there's lots of, particularly early on, but still every now and then people will go, oh, should this be is this a premium piece? And I've, not surprisingly, given my role, tried to be quite protective of premium, because I think our audience is paying us, and they should get the very best work as a result of that. And look, I think it was interesting, particularly early on, when not surprisingly there was quite a bit of, oh my goodness, is this going to work? And you're a lot of dreaming if you think anyone's going to pay you for this. And obviously I'm really glad that we've managed to prove them wrong. But I think that we do have a lot of conversations about it. One of the things that I am fond of saying is it is no different from people buying the newspaper, which they've bought the Herald in print for 150 plus years now, and it's the same thing. We didn't give the Herald away for free. So as you and I both know, good journalism costs lots of money, and I'm personally really proud that we've come up with a solution to help sustain and fund journalism into the future. That doesn't mean, if you said to me, would this be the model forever, I wouldn't put my hand on my heart and say that it was, because I think it's on everyone to be flexible and nimble and react to change. And I can't think of one single publisher, as I mentioned, who's started this way and kept that way forever. Everyone, the New York Times, everyone's experimented with the freemium hybrid, hard paywalls, all those kinds of things. So those kinds of things will continue to be on the table, because at 2 years it's gone in a flash. It also feels like forever, but we are kind of 1 minute past midnight in our journey, if you like, and this is just the start. So I'd be really surprised if in time that didn't change, but right now that's the model that we're committed to.
The Fold is brought to you by oOh!media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa, with over 4,000 out-of-home advertising sites nationwide across both street furniture and retail centres. I'm super grateful to oOh!media for enabling us to make unmissable connections with Kiwis.
Raising capital or taking your business to the world? Investment Fix has the lowdown on everything you need to make it happen. This season, we're exploring the US market, the opportunities it offers, what it takes to grow a business there, and the best way to approach investors. Join some of the superstars of the investment and business world as they share advice from their time in the US, so you can make your mahi count in this massive market. The Investment Fix podcast, brought to you by Invest New Zealand. Tune in today.
Are there things that have sort of surprised you in terms of, I know that when you announced that there was a strong sense of politics, sports and business being the sort of likely to be big drivers and converters, and I've heard sort of anecdotally that sports maybe hasn't been as strong, but obviously business is something you seem to have continually resourced up. What has the data shown you in terms of the big conversions, whether it's sections or even individuals? I've heard, for example, that Matthew Hurdon is just like a super converter, even though that's opinion.
Yeah, right. We've got lots of some super converted, staff members and journalists, which again I think is really encouraging. In fact, there's often, I hear, and it kind of makes my heart sing, there's a bit of competition between some of the journos in there about who was most read by subscribers that week or most converting. But I suppose I was a deep believer in this from the outset, and I was kind of looking at the world thinking definitely, that business and politics were going to lead the way. But it has been quite widespread and that news and sport do really work. Sport tends to be around a big event, so not surprisingly, for example, the America's Cup content really converted because a big event is on and people are really interested in it. But rugby as a topic continues to be a strong performer for us. Again, you could say not surprising because New Zealanders love their rugby and the people that really love it, that love it, really love it. So there are. I think the thing that I've liked has been seeing that wide range of conversions. And so, again, not surprisingly, because I've mentioned property before in terms of selling a newspaper, property remains something that people are deeply interested in New Zealand because it's so interesting, problematic. It's people's personal wealth is tied up in it, right? And people are really struggling to try and get on the ladder and want to read all about it, the latest government announcements, all those things. So I think that the stuff that worked at the beginning just continues to work for us. I feel like I need to turn my mind to the lifestyle and entertainment space because we have been very heavily driven in the news, sport, business, politics space because that has been what I can see would be the key success at the beginning. So we needed to make sure that we were really on the game in that space and continue to be. But I do feel like there's a lifestyle and entertainment opportunities because we have great content that is very print focused at the moment. If you think about the Vivas and the Canvases and all that kind of great content, I think lifestyle and entertainment could be, is something that we haven't really managed to put a great focus on digitally yet, but should. And again, one of the things that is on my mind about getting all our great content in front of people is that personalisation, because we produce so much great content every single day that no one will read all of it because we just don't have the time. So one of my things at the moment is thinking about how do we get that content resurfaced and how do we get it to the people that want it. And like your great bulletin, newsletters are a great part of the strategy. So I think what I really want to take some time to look at coming up is how do we get our great content to the people that want it and in the way they want it, because the 15 top spaces on our homepage on the website are hotly contested by everyone's pitching to get their stuff there, and we can't fit everything. So some things will not make the homepage at that particular moment in time, but there's no reason they can't come back. So that's one of the things that I think that I should be looking at and focusing on coming up.
In terms of the competitor set, like Business Desk is obviously a year old, but has really kind of put a lot of energy into it, which is also a sort of a paywall / premium product, where Stuff has gone in a very different direction in terms of its, sort of donation, more Guardian style approach. Does premium by its nature lend itself towards more kind of viewing its competitor set as people who are in the hard paywall business, or do you still sort of feel that normal kind of crosstown rivalry with Stuff, even though the business models are now increasingly divergent?
Different, yeah. Look, I personally think when we started, didn't we, talking about the fact that this time last year things seemed vastly different and quite stark, and where were we going to end up? And I feel that it's great that we're in this position, 12, 13 months later. I personally believe that we really need a healthy media environment. Competition is great, and that we should that there should be a range of great, strong competitors, and there are. And so I think that there is just natural competition amongst all the great publishers that we have in New Zealand. So I don't personally think, that just because we're premium, that, our competitors are the Business Desk, for example, at all. I think that we are trying to provide, we're a small country, we're trying to provide great content to New Zealand. You'll have seen that recently, we had a big marketing push, NZ Herald, and that's really what we want to be. And so, the onus is on us to produce great content that resonates across the country. So I love a healthy media environment. I'm really glad that, that we've got that media companies are still all here when we thought last year what may or may not happen. So great to see magazines coming back. I think all of that just makes a really healthy media ecosystem. And for me, it's not about, someone asked for a donation. I fundamentally think that reader revenue is the way of the future. And in fact, it puts a value on journalism, which it deserves. And that I hope that everyone is enjoying the success that we are, because we want a healthy media environment, right? And that's the way to help sustain that.
It's interesting. You talk about New Zealand's Herald, which I think, makes a lot of sense. But one thing that, and this is not necessarily just the Herald, it's true of the mainstream media as a whole, us included at times, is that we haven't necessarily been as good at reaching more diverse communities, younger communities, and so on, which as quite apart from the sort of moral imperative of doing journalism for everyone, there's also a commercial imperative in that you're necessarily shrinking the available pool. To what extent does thinking about how to serve communities that haven't necessarily been part of the kind of core thinking of largely Pākehā newsrooms historically, how much has that been folded into the Herald and into Premium's thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. It entirely is. And I know that, from talking to senior newsroom leaders up and down the country, that's on everyone's mind, right? Because as we were discussing earlier, it is actually it's become increasingly hard to attract people into journalism, and so that as part of that is that if you don't see your communities reflected in the media, do you want to be part of it? So we, like everyone, are putting a large focus on this. We recently employed Lois works in our newsroom. We recently appointed a head of diversity, and one of Lois's mandates is to look exactly at that, is to look at the content that we are producing in that space, but also to work with partners, because we're very aware that we don't have all the answers, and it is difficult to attract to talent into the newsroom in that space. So she works closely with the likes of Mara TV and looks for partnerships for some of that content. So increasingly that is exactly what we want to do, and she knows way more than I know, and she'll probably be a great interview with you. But some of those partnerships and communities she's looking to be able to get in contact with and communicate, to be able to bring them closer to us and work with us, because you're right, that's on us. And I think that also speaks to the rest of the country, and that the Herald particularly has been a very traditional Taupo North publisher, where that's where we've been forever, and we're trying really hard to extend our footprint across the country, and we've resourced up in our Christchurch office, for example, to be able to extend into the South Island coverage. But those issues are very much top of mind for us in our newsrooms, because, as you say, journalism for all, and that's a real challenge for us at the moment, both in terms of having ethnically diverse newsrooms and the content that we produce. But I think that it's really important and right that it should be top of mind, and it's just, again, the beginning of I hope, which will be a really beneficial role and important role for us at the Herald, for sure.
Is there a tension in terms of some of the stuff, and just more broadly, in that you have in ZB a juggernaut within talk radio that is and that creates opinion-driven content, which is often sort of very high and I'm sure very highly performing on the free side of the Herald homepage, but also by its very nature is very polarising in that, and you do see quite frequently just people on social media and in conversation sort of saying that they would never subscribe to the Herald because of that Mike Hosking, who is actually basically he works for another organisation. In fact, is quite frequently a critic of the Herald and its journalism sometimes, which is absolutely his right, while also featuring in its pages. Do you think having greater separation of the ZB and Herald brands might help you with Premium, or do you sort of get that feedback too?
Look, our news teams work really closely together. I mean, I think, have you been into our newsroom? That you can see that the live news team, as we call them, the team that is working, that will publish breaking news onto the website and onto NZB radio bulletins, work incredibly closely, the news team. The programs, not so much, because the programs are separate and they're a separate part of the business. So we do get feedback from time to time. I think, one of the things that I really like about Premium is that there are a range of people and a range of voices in there, and I think that's a media company's responsibility to provide a range of voices and views across our platforms. And so, but the reality is that there's not a whole lot of ZB voices, you would say, that are constantly crowding out the Herald website. They're just kind of not. And so there will be an occasional piece. I mean, Mike, for example, who, as you rightly say, is a juggernaut, does a monthly column for the Herald, which is in print and Premium. And Kerry McIver, for example, she's a Herald on Sunday columnist, as is Heather. And so those arrangements were in place well before we kind of even moved in together or became very physically close, and are obviously part of the same company. And again, they just represent a range of diverse voices. So, look, we don't we absolutely know that not everyone loves all of the voices that we publish all the time, but I think it's really important and vital that we have a range of them. I always kind of think that we're doing not a bad job when we get as much criticism for what people would perceive to be right-wing columnists as we do for left. So that feels to me, as long as we're getting that kind of feedback from both sides of the camp, we're making, we're kind of probably going okay down the middle.
Just switching tack slightly, relatively, I mean, it was relatively early after the launch of both the spin-off members, which is our reader revenue program, and something that we absolutely couldn't survive without now, and the Herald Premium. We both went through, as organisations, a Facebook accelerator, which was out of Sydney and provided kind of masterclasses in how to learn this thing. And I always thought it was there was an irony to it, in that, like, I thought that the classes and the whole experience was pretty amazing, and the fact they gave you a small grant at the end to sort of execute some of what you learned was brilliant. There was also the implication that, you're going to need reader revenue because advertising revenue is ours, and that sort of felt like what Facebook was saying there. And honestly, they're right. It's
$26 billion of revenue in the first quarter this year, their biggest first quarter ever.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so somewhere between sort of 65 and 85 cents of every dollar spent on digital advertising, depending on how you account for it, goes to Google and Facebook, or Google, Facebook and Amazon. So these programs are, whatever future we have, and we hope it's a bright and sustainable one, but whatever future online journalism has, the heart of it will be reader revenue, because there's just no way you can outcompete super well capitalized $1 trillion companies that don't have to pay for the content largely. Mm-hmm. The thing that I recall, and I hope I'm not speaking out of school, is that you were both head of Premium and not on that journey, on the accelerator. What is your personal attitude towards the big technology companies? Because they are super complicated. As much as I enjoyed the accelerator, Facebook about once a week does something where I'm like, I don't know if you should be allowed to be in business. And you just have to wrestle with these contradictions as a human.
Look, and as you say, but big complicated subject that, we could probably talk for hours on. I think I'm actually personally quite impressed about the business models and how incredibly clever they've been. I suppose I feel like they've grown to a point that no one could have potentially predicted. They have been these huge beasts, right? And so... And the Facebook particularly, obviously, who says it's not a publisher and doesn't behave like that. I watched with interest in Australia because and again, this is my personal view, and I'm not speaking for NZME on this. My personal view around the Australian situation was that I felt like it's fair and right that there should be a contribution paid by those those tech giants to publishers for their media content, because that seems to be a fair and just thing to do. I think it's interesting to see that from my readings and looking around the globe, it's actually only legislation that prompts, some of those things to happen. And obviously that was the case in Australia. And I know here in New Zealand there's a desire by our media and our government for those tech companies to be talking to New Zealand publishers. And, I hope those conversations are starting, because I think that would be a really great outcome if there was contributions made. And I think that, yes, they have, lots of people will point to the fact that they are spending some money and they do help and offer in some programs, but it isn't very much considering A, their revenues, and B, what they get in return in terms of our content. So I think that, it would be fantastic if there was some similar arrangement made in New Zealand as there has been in Australia with those publishers. So I hope that happens.
Do you, but I mean, would be... And this is what's happened in Australia, is essentially a voluntary end run around the threat of regulation, which feels like better than nothing, but also not as everything. Good as a regulation. My own personal view is that the Google and Facebook, or Alphabet and Facebook, are functionally natural monopolies and should be treated as utilities and regulated and taxed for... so that they can provide, we can sand off the dangerous edges. We can be aware of what, having natural monopolies in your society has. Do you have a view on what good regulation would look like? Because I personally feel like the Australian model while it's desirable for there to be something, I just didn't think that was it. Did you like the Australian model, or is there another one that appeals to you?
Well, look, as you say, it's complex, and I don't think I could look anywhere around the world and see something that I would have said that's the answer. And I think that's part of the problem, right? These incredibly huge companies have grown. America hasn't dealt with Facebook at all in a space where it could have. And again, that's because it's complex. I mean, from my reading and looking at various situations around the world, Facebook responds when there is legislative pressure on it, right? And so, for example, in Germany, when they introduced quite hefty fines for a failure to remove hate speech from the site, Facebook responds, So, but I haven't actually seen an elegant solution anywhere, right? Because as you point out, it is difficult. But I do, greater brains than mine will be on play at it. But I don't know if you've seen anything in the world that you've looked to go, actually, that's a really great and elegant solution. I personally haven't seen anything. But again, legislation is difficult, and times move on and things grow. So I just think a fair contribution to sustaining journalism from those companies is the ideal outcome. I don't know how to if it was easy, it would have been solved by now, right? So I haven't seen something that I've thought elegant and the right thing for us to do. I don't know, have you?
Not necessarily. I mean, to my mind, it should just be some sort of percentage of revenue, because they can move their profits very easily.
Right.
So
percentage of revenue associated with the corresponding level of traffic from that country, for example.
Yeah, or just the total revenues associated with that territory.
Okay.
Almost like a levy that becomes an access fee.
Okay.
And that you redistribute by some mechanism. I'd be happy if it was New Zealand On Air. But I think that idea of saying, say you take $1 billion out of New Zealand, that we know that you make roughly a 40% margin, profit margin, so you can probably live without 5% of your revenues. You're still making a shitload of money out of that country, and that can go towards healing some of the the democratic deficit, and just it's not just journalism that is, you also have all of the, misinformation and,
exactly.
and then government has to spend to pick up that tab, and they're not paying tax here in the first place, or paying very little. So, that to me is relatively elegant and not particularly hard to get your head around. I think the hard thing is that, there is a desire for it to be a sort of multi-pronged, like potentially an OECD solution. That takes a long time. There is a massive vested interest in the tech companies and taking as long as possible to get that done. So every quarter you slow down, you get another. You increase your war chest, and you put more water in the moat, and it's just harder and harder to win that arm wrestle. But
absolutely. And look, I think it's interesting. I think too, something for governments and companies in New Zealand to think about too is supporting local, right? Because Facebook has obviously got an incredible reach, and no getting around that. But so do to all of New Zealand's media companies combined. And I think we all know that. Yes, targeted advertising on Facebook, so getting in front of the customers you need to get in front of, but also the way Facebook works means that, not everyone that people potentially want to see, they are going to reach on Facebook. So again, there's, opportunities, and I know that happened, after Christchurch and the Christchurch call, that some companies and people acted with their wallets and supported New Zealand media in terms of advertising. And so again, I think that's a great thing for people to think about when they're thinking about where they spend their money.
Have you seen that on the premium side as well? That how have corporate subscriptions gone for you? Yeah,
pretty well. We didn't, as I say, we didn't launch with all the bells and whistles at the beginning, and we did have a lot of corporates at the time telling us we want the technology to have a corporate deal, and we were working pretty quickly to get that done. So yes, you get, we do obviously now sell corporate subscriptions in one of two ways, to either. You can either read it just at work, or you can read it on your domain email address, so you can have it kind of access all the time. And so we've got great teams selling that, and we get a lot of inquiries, and we are tailoring scale. It depends. We've got people that might have bought, have 10 people in their company that want to buy it versus a few hundred in another company. So we've got a great team working on that. So yeah, it was very much a loud and clear feedback from the beginning that a corporate solution was wanted, and we knew that was on our roadmap. But the tech, we work with ARC, the Washington Post's tech company, and I did not have an appreciation before I became involved with Premium about how massive some of these tech projects and things are and how complex they are, especially when we're adding our print subscribers into the mix. And so it was a very big, complex a beast of a thing, and so we introduced corporate subs as soon as we could, and they're going really well. And as I say, packages tailored to size of companies.
In terms of I don't think that there will ever be, and nor is it necessarily desirable, there will be an end to advertising as part of the commercial media funding model. But how far off is it to where Premium will be the dominant? That seems to be of the really successful companies which have made the transition, the likes of the FT, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and so on. That seems to be a real milestone when you start to have reader revenue outpacing advertising revenue. Do you have a sense of when that might be for the Herald and what that might do to the Herald when that day comes?
Sure. Look, I don't know around timing. I think that one of the things that we have done really well is sustain our print product, and that has been a really successful. Yes, while people are increasingly no longer getting a print paper, our print sales have held up relatively well over a period of time, and still contribute incredibly significant revenues, both in terms of circulation and advertising revenue within those. So it's certainly no way that we can turn our back on that, and nor do we want to. And look, I think the other thing too, when people ask me about the tensions of the overall audience and the premium audience, we need a big audience coming to the Herald, and we're really proud of the fact that we are, while maintaining our premium strategy strongly, we have been for the last 8 months in a row the number one news website in New Zealand, and that's really important for premium because we need people to come and, as you say, sample our journalism to see whether they're going to come and become a subscriber. So look, as you say, all the big global publishers that are making a real success of the reader revenue models have increasingly become subscriber first, and that is kind of a mantra of ours, subscriber first. Who knows how long it will take to get into that space entirely, but we're on the journey, and that's why we want to make sure that we are managing the transition. I think one of the things that's been really heartening for me, because as I mentioned at the start, I've been around a while now, and I love newspapers, and I love the curated experience of a newspaper magazine or a newspaper edition, and so one of the things that's been really great with Premium is that not only was it really important to us that we looked after our very loyal subscribers, so if you get the paper 5 days plus, you automatically have access to premium content online, and that has actually interestingly really reduced our print churn, because there's a finite space in the paper, right? Online you can get all this other stuff as well, so that has helped us maintain print, but we know that there's a transition period. So again, if people have wanted to stop getting their print content, we can sell them a premium sub. So it is a really sensible transition. And as you know, those global publishers talk about their combined subscriber audience, so it is print and digital. So we have really ambitious targets in that space, and we know that we're managing a transition. I don't know how long it'll take us. That's been, what was it, the New York Times took 8 or 9 years, I think, I suppose, to get there, and we've been on for 2 years. So it's a long journey, but it's really important that we've started, I think.
Do you feel like you've got the commitment of your executives and your board that they stay with this, as opposed to kind of getting distracted or impatient, which sometimes is an issue at media companies? Yeah,
sure. Look, and we utterly do. I think it's been fantastic to see actually that there is a real commitment there, and there is a real appreciation and understanding of how it will work. I mean, we're really thrilled that we've made this much progress so far, and that has then just continued to excite our executive and board and the investment community. So that the focus remains totally on. And I think Michael Boggs, the CEO, made a point of saying at the beginning that this was about continuing to invest in journalism. So that's something that we hold him to and say, when we're looking at new kind of strategies and things, we're there saying we would like some investment in this space and having a look at it. So we utterly have a commitment from the board, and Herald Premium is contributing significant revenues already to the company's bottom line. So they see that, know that, and have a commitment to it, and completely behind it.
Cool. Well, that's all we've got time for today. But thank you so much for coming along, Miri, and good luck with it. As you say, that as much as there is a competitive dynamic within New Zealand media, the overall, we know that we're all sort of
in this
hunkering
together.
down through this.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So good luck with your.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot.
That was The Fold, brought to you by our partners at oOh!media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa. Huge thanks to oOh!media for sponsoring this episode of The Fold and enabling us to make unmissable connections with Kiwis.
K-pop to me means more than just listening to music. It's learning to be myself.
The spin-off's new documentary, K-Pollies, follows 3 Pacific youth obsessed with K-pop. In a one-off documentary, see what they've found in Korean pop culture and how they bridge it with their own.
When you start dressing, looking different, everyone side-eyes you. But in K-pop, they're just like, no, celebrate yourself.
Watch K-Pollies today at thespinoff.co.nz/videos. Made with the support of New Zealand On Air. The Spin-Off Podcast Network.